Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So on Wednesday there was a Supreme Court hearing because the ban on gender-affirming care for minors in Tennessee is being challenged. Many believe that states shouldn't have the power to ban such procedures, even for minors. Outside the courthouse, there were various protesters, people stating the case for and against providing such procedures for minors.
I think the greatest gift of my life is to have kids, and to have a transgender child has made me so much more interesting, so much more wise. And for the Supreme Court justices, I encourage them to talk to their kids, their grandkids, their nieces and nephews, because I'll bet if they really sit down and ask them, do you know trans kids around you? Do you have any non-binary friends? They're going to say yes. And they're going to say that this is part of the beautiful rainbow of human beings everywhere.
Is it constitutional to sterilize children? I don't believe it is a state's right to medically harm any person.
No one is sterilizing anyone. I am on testosterone. It took me 3 years. I started the process when I was 15. I didn't get my first testosterone injection until I was 17.
Do you think that sterilizing kids is constitutional?
Definitely not. Kids have a right to puberty. They have a right to a normal sexual sex life when they're adults. And puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, transitioning in general, takes that away from them.
Is it constitutional to sterilize kids?
Absolutely not.
My daughter was 12 years old. She came to me and she told me she was trans. As a boy, she wanted to die. As a girl, she wanted to live. So for me, it's a no-brainer.
I'm 19. I figured this stuff out when I was like 15, 16, and I'm still struggling to even get the money to go for top surgery. Now my government is like, yeah, no. Who told you that my body is your choice?
Whew. So you can imagine the scenes outside the courthouse. I wish I could have gone. So the Supreme Court justices heard the various arguments for and against, but ultimately they were asking whether this was discrimination.
The below freezing temperatures in our nation's capital Wednesday morning did little to deter the demonstrations outside the Supreme Court. Meanwhile, inside, justices hearing oral arguments on the constitutionality of a Tennessee state law banning puberty blockers, hormone therapy, and surgery as treatment for transgender kids under 18. U.S. Solicitor General Elizabeth Proligar arguing this law violates the U.S. Constitution's 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause by discriminating against trans children and their parents' ability to make medical decisions on their behalf.
It's pretty significant that Tennessee now is completely overriding parents' wishes when they are best positioned to know their individual child and to have a good sense of whether the risks of this treatment are outweighed by the benefits.
Tennessee's Attorney General Jonathan Skrmetti defended the law before the court. We spoke with him after.
After these arguments, do you have any indication as to which way the justices might be leaning?
You never want to guess too much at what's going to happen. I think there are a few that are definitely not very sympathetic to our position. But it seemed like about half the court, at least, was paying attention and thinking seriously about the arguments we're making here.
Tennessee's law is meant to protect people like Prisha Mosley, who started transitioning from female to male at 16 with hormone treatment. She had both breasts removed. At 22, she detransitioned.
I was supposed to turn into a boy with no mental illness and no trauma and no problems, and I didn't. I was only a girl who took testosterone and then had surgery and still a woman.
On the other side, there's this mom of a trans child who traveled from Idaho to voice opposition to the ban.
We love our trans kids and we're not going to stop fighting until they have the same rights as our other children.
24 states currently restrict puberty blockers, hormone therapy, and surgery for transgender minors. The ruling on this case will impact the constitutionality of those laws as well. It'll likely be months before the justices issue their final decision.
And the question I've never seen these people answer, these trans activists, what age is too young when it comes to these procedures? Because if you listen to them, they never answer that question. Just like the limit for abortion. These people have no limits. I mean, if they believe that you are born trans, born in the wrong body, surely for them, the earlier the better. That's what's really scary. That's what's so disturbing. These are the people who want to influence decisions that affect children. That leads to the sterilization of children. That leads to the mutilation of children.
Together our power only grows. I love being trans. I love being with you. And we are going to take care of each other. Thank you for being here. I felt it inside.
I would say is nobody has to provide this medication to adolescents. These are not doctors being forced to provide this medication. These are doctors who are wanting to treat their patients in the best way that they know how based on the best available evidence to us. And these are young people who may have known since they were 2 years old exactly who they are, who suffered for 6-7 years before they had any relief. And what's happening here, it's not the kids who are consenting to this treatment, it's the parents who are consenting to the treatment. And as a parent, I would say when our children are suffering, we are suffering. And these are parents who love their children, who are listening to the advice of their doctors, of the mainstream medical community, and doing what's right for their kids, and the state of Tennessee has displaced their judgment.
To think that a 2-year-old can have a concept of being trans, a 2-year-old, and this is somebody who is all for children having access to medications and surgeries to affirm their gender identity, which apparently can be as early as 2 years old. No 2-year-old, no 8 or 9-year-old should be given access to medications and procedures that will permanently alter their bodies. They can't possibly understand the full ramifications of having these things done to their body. Even adults live to regret it. We are setting these kids up to be in a position that they cannot change once they have done it. It's as if detransitioners do not exist. They keep talking about how people, bigots, don't want trans kids to exist. But these people deny the existence of detransitioners. These people deny the problem of trans housing by proxy. That is a real thing, because it's the parents, some sick parents out there, who push their children into these procedures, who push their children into adopting certain labels. Some parents are ill-informed, some parents are pressured, but there's other parents out there who deliberately sow the seed of doubt in their child's minds, telling them that they're in the wrong body and encouraging them to go down this path. For whatever reason, I don't know. Maybe they don't get enough attention. What about protecting kids from abuse? What about protecting kids from harm? What about do no harm? A lot of these kids have issues that are unrelated to their gender, unrelated to their sex. It's just simply they could have autism, they could have depression, they could have been dealing with certain trauma. And because they've been exposed to these concepts, they decide, or they've been told that this is the answer to their problems. They've been lied to, many of them. And let's not forget there is a social contagion aspect going on when it comes to kids identifying as trans. More than likely, kids who end up going down this route probably spend a lot of time on social media. Let's just be real.
It's a pretty complicated and controversial case when you start to get into the details, but just for some background, there's 23 states right now that have basically some restrictions on it. In 2 states it's banned, and then in 2 states it's blocked, banned, and it's set to take effect in New Hampshire up there. So that's happening on the state level, okay? So this is a question about, is it constitutional? But how do people feel about it? Strongly divided here in America. Strongly favor this kind of law that bans at 33%, strongly oppose at 32%. This is one of the reasons the Supreme Court takes up these issues, because people are deeply divided. The constitutional issue is going to get a question here. But if you look at the adults in America who have identified as transgender over the years, look at the increase. For the baby boomers at 1%, then 2%, 2% for baby boomers, goes up a little bit for Gen X, up for millennials, but 22.3% for Generation Z. What is happening here? We want to ask Chloe Cole. She is a detransitioner and do no harm patient advocate. Thanks for doing our show today. It's good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
So you're at the Supreme Court today. For people that aren't familiar with your story, could you tell us a little bit about why you would be there today and the message that you want to send?
So I am a detransitioner and an advocate for the rights of children to grow up with their bodies fully intact and for parents to raise their children with the best options possible. I went through a medical gender transition myself when I was a child between the ages of 12 to 16. And this medical ideology was something that consumed most of my adolescent formative years. And I've lost parts of my body. I was on puberty blockers at 13, cross-sex hormone injections, and I underwent a double mastectomy to remove my breasts when I wasn't even old enough yet to drive a vehicle. And I think that the fact that we're mutilating children in the name of their momentary feelings is horrific beyond words.
Well, it's so good to see Chloe looking so well. She's obviously healing and recovering from what was done to her, but she has blossomed into a beautiful young woman despite what she was put through. And I don't want any other kid to wake up one day and think, you know what? I wish I had my breasts. I wish I hadn't had bottom surgery. How on earth can we justify even potentially putting a kid in that position? You can't grow these body parts back. You can't undo what has been done. So surely it's better to delay these procedures, especially when there's no evidence that it actually addresses the issues that they face. Maybe they just need some counseling. Maybe they just need somebody to talk to. Maybe they need support and love, not medical procedures, and to turn them into lifelong patients. So conservative justices on the Supreme Court appeared reluctant during Wednesday's oral argument to overturn Senate Bill 1, the Tennessee law in question, with Chief Justice Roberts and Justice Brett Kavanaugh suggesting that state legislators, rather than courts, are best equipped to regulate medical procedures. The Constitution leaves such questions to the people's representatives, rather than to 9 justices on the Supreme Court, none of whom is a doctor. And what's crazy is, on one hand, these radical leftists want to take away parental rights. They don't want parents to know anything about what's going on with their child when it comes to school. They think the school can decide if their child wants to use another name or identify as a different pronoun, all while leaving the parents in the dark. So when it suits them, they want to take away parental rights. But when it comes to mutilating children, giving them access to procedures that will permanently alter their body, all of a sudden they're for parental rights. It's absolutely ridiculous. And that could be why there's a divide, because some people are seeing this as a parental rights issue. But what people need to understand is these procedures, as far as I'm concerned, are outright abuse. Subjecting children to these procedures before they can even consent, before they know the full implications. Even the doctors don't even know the full implications yet. So the United States versus Schimetti, it centers on a Tennessee law that bans gender transition treatments for minors in the state. The law, passed in March 2023, also takes aim at healthcare providers in Tennessee who continue to provide gender transition treatments to transgender minors, opening them up to fines, lawsuits, and other liability, as they should be. You're going to take it upon yourself to do this to minors. Those minors should have legal recourse if they turn around and regret what has been done to them. These doctors need to be held accountable if they're going to go down that path.
Vetoed 75 bills in the last legislative session. As a Republican, I take it you probably agreed with most of those. Which one of those stands out as one that you were relieved that he vetoed to stop a certain piece of legislation from being enacted?
I think vetoing bills is a great thing, but one of the things where I have been attacked by my own party on, which is kind of ironic, because our Republican governor is the only Republican governor who did not veto a child transgender bill. And my own party is not happy that I am the most vocal about that, but if you look at communism over the years and what they've done to people with mental health problems, especially children, they would force sterilize them or kill them off in communist countries. And now we are convincing parents that if they don't allow these children to have these surgeries, which permanently sterilize them, that they will commit suicide. And there's no research to support that. In fact, it's the opposite. A large portion of these children are autistic. Another large portion are children who suffer from complex PTSD and have dissociative states. And I was very shocked that our Republican governor did not veto SB 163.
Are there a lot of transgender students in Nye County? Is this a pressing problem in Nye County?
It's less than 1% of our population.
What's the first bill draft that you would request if you won?
A bill draft, I would say that I would actually like to amend SB 163. I think that if we're going to support these surgeries being done to children, then we should force these physicians to put their money where their mouth is. And what I mean by that is, I feel like there should not be a statute of limitations. So if they are so positive that these children are able to make a permanent decision when the brain doesn't fully develop until age 26, that we should allow them to have full reign to sue these physicians up until age 30 if they later decide that they actually were suffering from other mental health conditions and they weren't truly transgender.
Exactly. And one thing that transgender individual, the female, was saying is that there are long-term studies that show that, kids don't regret doing these procedures. Studies that span over 5 to 6 years.
Tomorrow is about whether banning medical care, overriding the consent of parents, the recommendations of doctors is a violation of equal protection.
What do you say to physicians who are sensitive and supportive of trans kids, obviously don't want ideation, etc., but wonder if there is enough data as of now to prove that it is beneficial to allow these sort of treatments before the age of 18?
So I would say three things. And the first is we have decades of both clinical experience and research data showing that this is medical treatment that provides critical benefits to adolescents who need it. And so this is not new. This is not new medication. And so we have that information. We have long-term studies that track people for 5-6 years. The Supreme Court this week heard arguments in an FDA case in which the FDA referred to long-term as being 6 months of follow-up. Here we have years of follow-up. And so that's the first thing. And then the second thing I would say is nobody has to provide this medication to adolescents. These are not doctors being forced to provide this medication. These are doctors who are wanting to treat their patients in the best way that they know how, based on the best available evidence.
How about we monitor these people until they're at the age of 30? Then come and tell me how they are really doing. And then we had Ketanji Brown Jackson, the Supreme Court Justice who doesn't know what a woman is. She was comparing this to the fight for equality when it came to marriage. And I'm not talking about gay marriage. I'm talking about interracial marriage.
Being drawn by the statute. That was sort of like the starting point. The question was whether it was discriminatory because it applied to both races and it wasn't, necessarily invidious or whatever. But, as I read the statute here, the case here, the court starts off by saying that Virginia is now one of 16 states which prohibit and punish marriages on the basis of racial classifications. And when you look at the structure of that law, it looks in terms of, you can't do something that is inconsistent with your own characteristics. It's sort of the same thing. So it's interesting to me that we now have this different argument, and I wonder whether Virginia could have gotten away with what they did here by just making a classification argument the way that Tennessee is in this case.
So petitioners represented by US Solicitor General Elizabeth Prelogar argued that SB 1 discriminates against individuals on the basis of sex, which itself warrants a heightened level of scrutiny under the Equal Protection Clause. That SB 1 categorically bans treatment when and only when it's consistent with the patient's birth sex. In Tennessee, petitioners argued the way the sex-based classification works is that, from the standpoint of any individual who wants to take medications, their sex determines whether SB 1 applies. Prelogar cited one of the unnamed petitioners in the case, whom she referred to only as John Doe. Doe wants to take puberty blockers to undergo a typical male puberty, but SB 1 says that because John's sex at birth was female, he can't have access to those medications. Prelogar argued, and if you change his sex, then the restriction under SB 1 lifts, and it changes the result. So no, if you're female You can't go on puberty blockers and start taking testosterone and then go through male puberty. No way is that male puberty. You are blocking this female from going through puberty. There is no way around that. You can't change it and say, well, it's male puberty that she wants to go through. Like, what is this? Taking testosterone doesn't mean a woman or female can go through male puberty. You're crazy if you're asserting that. So on the issues of classification, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson cited parallels to the race-based case of Loving versus Virginia, which overturned Virginia's law forbidding marriage between persons of different racial categories. In that case, a white man and a black woman. She noted that under SB1, an individual can be prescribed puberty blockers or hormone treatments if doing so is consistent with their sex, but not if it is inconsistent. Asking Rice, so how are they different?
Concerns have you had about speaking out?
That I'm gonna be like murdered. Like one day I'm gonna be walking down the street and somebody's gonna come up and like shoot me or something.
That's a really scary thing to be worrying about at 10 years old.
Yeah, that should not be a worry.
And this is what these deranged adults are telling these kids. That laws that are designed to protect children, to make sure that they are protected from abuse, means that the whole world is against them. The whole world wants to make sure they don't exist, wants to end their lives even. This is what they're teaching these kids. Who taught these things to this 10-year-old? That's what I would like to know. No 10-year-old should be talking like this. So I hope the Supreme Court justices make the correct decision, a decision that protects children, a decision that holds doctors accountable and parents accountable when they're subjecting their children to this. Kids are not born in the wrong body. And if they are having issues with gender dysphoria, there's so many other options that offers support to these children that doesn't involve mutilation, sterilization. And of course, the Cass report was mentioned, the research that has been done in other countries. And apparently, because these countries haven't outright banned these procedures, they've strongly limited them though, at least in the UK. Puberty blockers are heavily restricted.
In this statute and send the case back. If the court wants to go ahead and look at what's happening in Europe, the UK has not categorically banned this care. Sweden, Finland, and Norway, the other jurisdictions that my friends point to, have not banned this care. And I think that's because of the recognition that this care can provide critical, sometimes life-saving benefits for individuals with severe gender dysphoria.
She has no evidence of what she just said. Sometimes life-saving. Nope, they found no evidence of that these procedures are life-saving. If they haven't outright banned it, it's because, for whatever reason, that these are still medications. So they feel that they should be available in the rare cases that they're needed. I mean, puberty blockers were supposed to be for kids that go through puberty at a very young age. It wouldn't be beneficial for them to be experiencing, periods, for example, for a young girl at 9 years old. So maybe there's a technical reason why they can't just outright ban them, but they've heavily restricted them. It's not because they see them as beneficial. The whole point of the research was to decide whether these procedures are beneficial, and they found that there's no evidence of that. So what is the point? Please tell me. So let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. Take care of yourselves, and God willing, I will see you in the next video.